Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can find the show online at buildingthefutureshow.com or follow me on Twitter at Building Show. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube. I'm excited to announce that I am now a brand ambassador for the Business Rock Summit in Manchester, England, April 21st and 22nd, where Steve Wozniak is headlining. More details at business-rocks.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Bob Fitts, founder and producer of SUPEX, the Startup Expo. Bob, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me again, Kevin. How are things today in Canada?
Oh, pretty good. We're supposed to get a big snowfall today, but I can't complain because we haven't had really any snow yet this year. And it's almost the end of November. So, and it's in sunny Florida, right? I'm assuming it's sunny.
Yeah, well, actually, we're having a cold spell, but you would not like how I would describe a cold spell.
Do you have to put on like a jacket or something? Is that a cold spell down in Florida?
Long pants, but you get the idea. Long
pants. T-shirt, long pants, I got you.
Yeah, actually, that's exactly right. Anyway, good to be back on the show. Good to talk to you, and good to be seeing you here in a couple of months down at SUPEX.
Yeah, I'm excited about coming down and how things are coming together with that. So maybe just for our listeners, Bob has been on the show before. There's a previous episode on Building the Future Show where we kind of cover the full conference and kind of what it's all about. But I would still kind of like you to give the listener another overview of what exactly the Startup Expo is and kind of why you're doing it and why it's important.
Yeah, well, the SUPEX, the Startup Expo, and if people are interested, they can go to sup-x.org. SUPEX is a two-day international conference and exposition for the early stage community. It's going to be in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which is, for those who don't know exactly where that is, it's just 20 miles from Miami. They're basically the same thing. We have about 75,000 square feet at the convention center. It's a two-day event. We're expecting about 1,500 attendees from throughout North America. The first day is very intensive workshops. We have a women's forum for women entrepreneurs and women's investors, and the afternoon is very pragmatic workshops for entrepreneurs, and that makes for a long day. So then we have our opening reception. The next day is a conference. It's fairly traditional in structure, general sessions, keynotes, breakouts. Startup Canada is one of our partners. We have about 36 entrepreneurs, focused nonprofits, and also accelerators throughout North America that are our partners, helping us get the word out. We also have a startup competition. You just have to buy a ticket to the event, but the event's very cheap, and that's on purpose because the entrepreneurs are the star of the show, so you can get a ticket for only $99. We take the top 50 applicants to our startup competition, get a booth on our exhibit hall floor for free next to our corporate paying sponsors. And then we'll have the very last general session is a fast pitch competition, and we award $50,000 in cash and prizes to the top three who placed in the top three of that. We're also arranging feeder startup competitions around the U.S. and Canada to feed into those 50 slots. So there are certain cities around North America that we're working with to identify a semifinalist from their area. And so there's a lot going on. It should be a really cool event. It's a great time of the year to be in South Florida. The weather is amazing here in Florida. It really is, down in the Miami area in February. And then, we'll have speakers from all over North America, investors and other people. And it should be a really cool event. We're super excited about it. If you look on the website on the speakers page, you can get a really good sense of the quality of the people that we've recruited so far to speak. We've recruited about half of the 55 speakers that we'll have by February. And then if you go on the sponsors page, you can kind of get a sense of the quality of the organizations that have chosen to affiliate with us. And we're proud of having them be our partners.
Sure. No, that's awesome. What? Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Of course, I forgot to mention the date.
It's all good.
It's February 16th and 17th of 2016. So if you're in the U.S., that would be the 2 days immediately after President's Day, which is Monday, February 15th.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And just for the listener, that if you're going to be at the conference, I'm going to actually be at the conference recording shows for the radio show, and they will air in Atlanta, and then they'll be turned into a podcast as well. And the podcast is actually being listened to in over 50 countries now. So, you know, and the show,
wow.
Yeah, exactly. And even just for example, Bob, your show has the show airs Tuesdays and Thursdays in Atlanta, like new shows, and then the other days of the week it just gets repeated. So your show, your past shows, even aired a bunch of times as well in the last couple of months. So, you know, the show does get quite a bit of exposure, and I've got quite a bit big social network as well from, you know, Twitter and LinkedIn as well. And so, you know, just being on the show, I think could potentially really help some people out there. And, you know, I am always looking for people to be on the show, so definitely reach out to me. And I think, you know, what you guys are doing with the Startup Expo is super important and super interesting, and that's kind of why I wanted to be a part of it.
Well, that's very kind of you, first of all, and second of all, we're really pleased to have you as a partner. It is a cool event. I don't mean to say I'm bragging, but as someone who, I also run a nonprofit that's focused on the entrepreneur world, and I've seen good events and I've seen bad events, and we're excited about what this one wants to be and what it's shaping up to be. It really will be a cool place. I mean, it's not expensive, and that's important. We want entrepreneurs to be able to come from afar, and we recognize that they'll have to spend money to travel to get here, but we want them to then look at the event and see that the opportunities to learn and to network and to potentially exhibit and compete in a startup competition, we want those to be attractive enough but priced reasonably enough that they can still incur travel costs and participate, not also then have to spend a ton of money. And it'll be a nice large event, so you know the scale is important because you'll meet, you know, really cool investors and other entrepreneurs and technologists and customers and all kinds of contacts from throughout the U.S. and Canada. So we're really, really excited about it and very glad that you're going to be down here helping.
Yeah, no, I'm excited, and I think it's going to be interesting because I also signed a deal to do, the show's going to be doing TV episodes in the new year, and season 1's going to be filmed in Atlanta, but season 2, which will probably be summer of next year, will actually be filmed in your area. So, you know, maybe we can get you on the TV show in 2016.
Well, I'm not sure about that, Kevin. I have a face for radio, but I'm certainly happy if you're going to be down here. I'm certainly happy to help you find the right people to interview for your show, and that's great. And we're actually getting ready to make an important announcement. We have a guy who's nationally famous for a TV show about startups is going to be emceeing our show. I can't announce it yet, but we're excited. So cool. Glad you're going to be here. Tell me when we get offline sometime. Tell me more about that, and I'm happy to help you.
Sure. No, that's awesome. So maybe let's cover a little bit about kind of investment and raising capital. I know you have kind of a background in that, and I think it's really useful for the listener to talk about that kind of stuff.
Well, I will, but as you know, I'm a little ADD, and I'm going to take you off the path first, if that's okay, because there's something important. There's something important that I think that entrepreneurs understand. Unfortunately, I think raising capital is overemphasized in the startup world.
Why do you say that?
Well, because I think people see stories of Mark Zuckerberg and, you know, the gal at Theranos who's now in a little bit of trouble. You know, people who create unicorns and, you know, then they're on TV and they have jets and the big life and, you know, they're giving away money to charities and they still have the big life. I mean, I think we've glamorized the startup world, and everybody wants to be a unicorn, and to be a unicorn you got to go raise $1 billion and blah, blah, blah. You know, only 1 in 10,000 startups ever get venture capital money.
Really? Interesting. I didn't know it was that low.
Yeah, it's that low, and you can go to the Angel Resource Institute or others, and there's people have their own research, but whether it's 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 1,000, it's not 1 in 100. It's not 1 in 10, and I think people think it is. Now, when I say these things, keep in mind that my full-time job, occupation, and passion is the startup world, so I never want to diminish enthusiasm, but I do think a dose of reality is important. And
Sure.
You needn't build the next Facebook or Google to create an incredibly cool company, So, and there's so much emphasis on raising money that I think what some people think is, I put together a plan, and it's a really cool plan, and I'll put it on a piece of paper, and then I'll go raise money around it, and then we'll do everything. And that couldn't be further from how you really go about doing it. And so you wanted to talk about raising capital, and we can talk about the proper way to do it. But more and more, I see what we call now wantrepreneurs.
Yep.
We see wantrepreneurs who really just want to hang out in the co-work space and act like they're entrepreneurs, and then and then we see what I call bong hit businesses.
Okay.
which are like, dude, wouldn't it be great if we had this app where you could make this, gorgeous waitress appear with our Heineken without ever leaving our bar stool? And they're really, and by the way, I see that app about 5 times a year, so it's really an example. I was just not just being funny, but
that's hilarious.
But so my point is that an idea, a really good idea actually, a really good idea and a business aren't the same thing.
Sure.
A really good idea then has to be really, really scrutinized and poked holes in by a lot of other smart people who've got a lot more experience than you, and it really has to be vetted and then eventually, tested, and we'll talk about this more as we start talking about the capital raising process, but it's not the same thing. And so when I say that we overemphasize the capital raising piece, I say that because what I also want to say is that most startups should not even think about getting into the business unless they're willing to bootstrap it themselves for 1 to 3 years, working part-time at night and on weekends until they've validated the concept, built out the model, put together some mode of infrastructure, and created, if not the basis for traction, actual traction before they go raise money. And so they're putting in their own sweat equity, literally, and their own money, and then friends and family money. And if they're not willing to do that, then they are kind of entrepreneurs. They've watched too many Shark Tank episodes. They need to step away from the Kool-Aid.
Interesting. Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because so many people give you advice that you need to quit your full-time job and give it all. And, there's a lot of stuff in the media over the last couple of years where that's ruined people's lives because they've spent everything and it just never went anywhere.
Well, look, you're a reasonably smart guy. I'm a reasonably smart guy. I'm not a genius. I know.
Neither am I.
I know that I'm smart enough to know that I'm not. And guess what? I know lots of really, really smart people who are way smarter than them. And almost all of them aren't geniuses either.
Yeah, fair.
So unless you're a genius and you have come across, you have just a phenomenal idea that in terms of the development of intellectual property, I mean, it is really game-changing. Most people are going to come up with some pretty cool businesses that have commercial potential, but they're not going to be Uber, and that's okay. I don't think everyone has to be Uber in order to create a good business.
Sure.
So I do think that as a result of that, the reality is that no one, unless you are that needle in a haystack genius, and you should be honest with yourself. If you're listening to this, more than likely you're not, and that's okay. You can still be really smart without being a genius. Unless you're that, then, you're probably not going to find anybody to invest in you until they're reasonably sure you've invested a lot in something yourself, and so has your family. Because if your dad or your uncle won't invest in it and you haven't invested in it, why on earth should they?
No, that's good advice.
And so, to every exception, there are rules. I'm not saying this is this for everybody, but I'm talking to the general audience of entrepreneurs out there. You better be prepared to bootstrap it, and you're more like what the model was 20 years ago, which is the guy then it would have been a guy in the garage, but now it's a guy in the gal wherever, probably a Starbucks actually, but not in the garage. But it's going to be something that you do at night and weekends until it develops enough that you can actually then try to raise enough money to make the leap. So that's a really long-winded introduction about raising capital. I also think the other thing is that, so now that you're committed to bootstrapping it and you know what the reality is, I think the next focus isn't, again, on raising capital, and everybody thinks it is. The focus is on customers.
Sure.
Businesses are in business to create a customer base. It's not just about raising capital and trying to hit a grand slam and you think you're going to retire or something. I mean, a business exists to serve some sort of customer base. And so I would suggest placing a lot more emphasis on figuring out how you're going to access that customer base and convert them and service them and expand that base than overemphasizing the capital piece. Look, I'm not naive, and I know the people in the audience are, and I'm not saying that you don't have to raise capital. I mean, it's like gas in a gas tank, and without it, the car doesn't move. I'm just saying that an enhanced emphasis on responding to your customers' needs and adapting your products or your services, your offerings to those needs, so that it's more commercial, is more valuable in the long run. The more customer traction you have, the more money you can raise, or you can raise the money at a better price. I mean, the other concept that people need to understand is when they're raising money, you don't raise money, you buy money.
Okay. Okay. Can you elaborate a bit on that? I'm curious to know kind of why you call it, or you say it like that.
The reason I say it like that is because I want people to understand what it really is. You don't when you get a loan, you're not borrowing money, you're buying money. The price of that money is the interest rate and the term.
Fair. Okay, that makes sense.
So, money has a price. Equity has a price. It's not, yes, it's raised, but I'm being a little facetious in order to drive a point home. And the point is that money has a price. Mm-hmm. And the price is the percentage of the valuation or other economic and non-economic terms that go along with that, whether those are control or there's a lot of other terms that can be involved. And so it's important to understand that the stronger your business is, typically because of the traction it has, the more you can control those prices and those terms. And again, just another reason to emphasize commercializing the product. It needs to be a higher emphasis than the one that the startup world kind of glamorizes about raising capital and being on Shark Tank and creating the next unicorn. So look, that's my old guy speech, Kevin. You got a 10-minute answer before. We're not even talking about raising capital, but that was that's the long-winded caveat that I wish people would pay more attention to.
But I think that's good advice. I think that's really good advice, because I think you're right. So many people's business model is, well, do you have any customers? Well, no, I'm just going to sell my big idea to, Twitter, Facebook, or Google. And you're like, well, their biggest business is customers or users, I guess. So I think it's really good advice.
Well, we'd all have great businesses if someone would give us a $50 million marketing budget, now wouldn't we?
Sure, of course.
I mean, so, and one other concept to understand to people about how their ideas in the venture world work. Not angel, but like venture, So just so people understand,
Do you
the
maybe want to cover
here,
what the difference
Yeah.
between venture and angel is? I think some people don't really understand that.
So like the progression about how money is typically categorized along the way is, there's your sweat equity, which is, whatever you're putting in of your own time and bootstrapping it, which is your own money. Then there's friends and family, or as some people sarcastically call it, friends, family, and fools. And so that's the next set of progression. And then after that, you're probably going and talking to an angel group. And angel groups typically invest in companies within about 90 minutes to 3 hours from where they're located, and that's because they're hands-on. They want to be involved, and involved doesn't mean just monitor progress. I think people need to understand that, you want people to be involved because we all only know what we know. And so you want people involved. Not only is money has a price, but when you go raise money, you're looking for a partner.
Sure.
It's not like taking your company public, which is totally different. That's way at the other end of the spectrum. But in the early stages of your company, you're looking for partners who are also investing in you, so they know the vertical you're in. So if you're in some kind of consumer good, then you might want a guy on your board who used to be at Procter and Gamble or PepsiCo or something like that. So you're looking at people that have commercial contacts that would benefit your company, or they have, if you're a software company, they understand, about software development and distribution. You're looking for expertise that accompanies that money. So again, now you've invested, you've bootstrapped, then there's friends and family, then there are angels, and they're going to invest on a regional basis. And now we have what are called seed series funds, which are a relatively new phenomenon, and that is, it used to be you kind of did the friends, family, and angel stuff, and then eventually got big enough and you went and tried to raise VC money, and now there's kind of more seed series, which is, these are funds, and they're typically put together by either what people refer to as super angels or VCs themselves, who they're smaller funds and invest smaller dollar amounts. So they might put out money in $50,000 to $1 million chunks.
Okay.
And that's called seed. And then after seed series, you go to what's more traditionally referred to as venture capital, even though technically all of this is. And venture capital is when you go and raise what you're called your A round. And your A round, depending on which vertical you're in, et cetera, the characteristics of your business are different. But by the time you've gone to get an A round, you either have significant revenues, or you do have significant revenues, and your pathway to profitability is visible, although it could be a ways off. There's the path itself is pretty well known, and that's broad and not entirely accurate as to the breakdowns, but that's generally the path. And then once you have a Series A, you can have a Series A, B, C, D. It can go pretty deep into the alphabet, and then eventually a company is typically, taken public or, permanently private if someone wants to keep it that way. Typically not through a fund, though. That's it. That's that's broadly the progression.
Sure.
But most people aren't going to get deep in that alphabet, is my point.
Sure. No, that makes total sense. So let's say I have a company and I, kind of boot sweat equity it, and it's been around for a couple of years. I have some customers, maybe I'm not quite profitable, or maybe I am, and I do want to kind of get a little bit of investment. What do investors kind of want to see at that kind of early stages? And maybe we cover kind of what investors want to see at each one of the kind of investment stages.
Sure. So like you've done the friends and family thing, and you've raised say $50,000, and you've put your own money in it. Now it's time to raise a more substantial amount to further establish the product market fit and to help you develop some small amount of infrastructure. And part of that might just be simply converting you from an unpaid to a paid employee and giving you some more marketing dollars to hire somebody, to come on full time to help market. But it's basically to take the garage into more of an operating business.
Right.
And so you're going to go raise, angel rounds can be, as small as say $25,000 to $50,000, and they could be up to several $100,000. And if that's the case, you're not raising from one angel group for the most part. You're probably going several places because they're, in general, angels groups, unless you're in, say, New York or Silicon Valley, most regional angel groups don't have the ability to, put in, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 into something.
Sure.
And so it'll be spread out. So you're looking at, a max of a couple $100,000 from an angel round.
Okay.
Typically.
And how do you pitch that, or how do you reach out to kind of an angel round or group?
Well, angel, depending on where you live, I mean, some of this stuff, you just Google, angel groups in, whatever your area
Sure.
is.
Okay.
Atlanta or whatever, and you can find angel groups throughout. And then the more research you do, the better. You really need to understand what do they like to invest in, what verticals are in and what verticals are out. It does no good for you to have a medical device company idea, and you're going and trying to raise money from a company that doesn't do medical devices. So
Sure.
I mean, do a little bit of research, find out who the groups are, read their website. If it doesn't say explicitly, it's possible, most of them should. If it doesn't say explicitly what they do and don't invest in, call the executive director. Send them an email, find out more. Then you want to find out, what if they do, invest in your vertical. When's the last time they did it? You just want to get a sense of the activity of the organization.
Sure.
There's some angel groups that are pretty sleepy, and there's some angel groups that are pretty active. You don't want to, you need to be talking to a lot of people in the process because it's a great way to meet people, and people in the angel world are typically benevolent and helpful, and so, making contacts is important, but, you also don't want to spend a lot of time. There's a saying, you fish where the fish are. Well, you don't need to fish where they aren't. So the more that you learn about the group, the better. And so now let's say that you've identified the proper angel group and it's time to start talking to them. Usually just the conversation happens in a couple ways. First of all, it's important that a warm introduction, like most things in life, is a lot easier than a cold introduction.
Sure.
So if you know somebody that knows somebody, and they can take a look, that's helpful. But I will say that a lot of the angel groups that are really busy, unless you really know someone really closely who's on the board and you get them to kind of almost sponsor your or champion, I guess is a better term, champion your deal. Most angel groups in at least large cities are so active, they see hundreds and hundreds of deals a year that unless you have a really strong relationship where someone can spend time with you personally and decide that they're interested in the deal for their group or even themselves personally and champion it to the group to at least let you come pitch. And that's hard to do because most people aren't going to have those relationships. Most of these groups are so busy that they'll do one of two things. They'll say, okay, email us a pitch deck, and I'll explain about pitch decks in a minute.
Okay.
Or they'll say, oh, well, go apply to our Gust portal, for instance. Gust is a online angel community investment tool, that portal really, that just a huge percentage of angel groups in the United States use, and there's others, Venture 360, et cetera. But basically, it's a online template that you fill out that captures, really critical data about your business, and then these groups or their executive director look at all the people that have applied that month, and they say, okay, well, out of those, 100, let these 8 or 10 look pretty good. Maybe we'll have, half of those come pitch this month. And this again is the reason why, if you do have warm relationships, it's important. The amount of deals that come at people is staggering, and they have a hard time sifting through them.
Sure.
So just keep in mind that it's hard to get in front of these. So that's the Gus portal. Now, some groups will say, send us a deck, a pitch deck.
Mm-hmm.
And, a pitch deck, you can Google what's in a good pitch deck, how to do a good pitch deck, et cetera. So it's not hard to find how to do this, which is amazing because how crappy most pitches are. They're really bad, and they needn't be when there's so many examples out there of what a good deck should look like. But most of them are not good. Now, sometimes they're not good because the person running the business doesn't have kind of marketing and presentation skills. So you might have a guy who's a great software developer who's got a great idea, and it really is great, but that person is, kind of probably of an engineering or technical perspective and hasn't put together a lot of presentations in some cases. And the problem with that is that a lot of good ideas will not get seen as a result of that. So someone involved in your process needs to know how to put together a decent deck. So what is a decent deck? Deck should never be...
Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm curious then, would you potentially get somebody else to pitch your company if you're not very good at public speaking?
I don't think so. And
No?
the reason is that you're just going to look, if you're going to be a business owner, there's many things you're going to have to be, and being better at presentations is one of them you're going to have to learn how to be. Now, you might need to have, all good partnerships are based on people having complementary skill sets.
Right.
If you're a hyper tech guy, then somewhere in your team is going to need to be more of a business ops kind of marketing guy.
Sure.
And so maybe that's the guy that pitches, and then you're at the pitch too, but you're there when they start asking questions about, okay, so how does the, whatever your IP is, how does it work? And then, you can answer it in geek speak, but someone's got to speak English in that room.
Sure.
And so, if your point is, should it be outsourced? The answer is it can't be outsourced. No one has the passion like an insider.
No, fair.
And so someone on your team does have to be able to speak it. But a deck is never longer than 15 slides, and the first page is the cover, and the last page is your contact information. So you're really talking 13 pages or slides of what I call the meat.
Okay.
And those are, there's people, depending on what you're talking about, the order can be kind of different, but in general, it's pretty linear and very basic. I mean, what is the problem to be solved?
Okay.
What is the business problem someone needs to figure out a way to solve it in a better manner? What is the problem? Okay, what's the problem? Second, what is it that you're offering to do to solve it? And that can be a slide or two. Who is the team? And keep in mind, for most startups, people are investing in the team every bit as much as they are the idea. Because the team is what is the likelihood that this great idea ever comes to pass?
Sure.
How is this thing ever going to get done? So, headshots, bios or at least bios of all the key players and what their roles are in the company. What's the market like? Who are your competitors? Why is your offering, and how is your offering different? And a lot of times this is kind of a grid with check marks, these are the key things, and here each of the columns is the companies, and there's check marks, and inevitably the company in the deck has more check marks than everybody else, but at least it's comparative.
Right.
What's your go-to-market strategy? And this probably gets more overlooked than anything else. Okay, great. You've defined the problem, you understand the market, and you've told us what the solution is. How's that going to happen? And that's what people never think through.
But
distribution is so hard, yet people don't pay much attention to it. How are you actually going to get from your office desktop into customers' hands? Is it going through value-added resellers? Are you going to do inbound marketing? Is there a digital marketing strategy? Or is it a traditional marketing strategy? What is the marketing plan? How's it going to get sold?
So is that kind of tying into your point about, figuring out your customer base based on kind of bootstrapping for, a year or 2 to 3 years or whatever that timeline is? Because then that kind of answers that question. You're like, well, I already defined the market. I have the market. Is that kind of fair to say?
Yeah, it is. And not everybody needs to test their product for, 2 or 3 years, but
sure.
Look, you do need to have, some proof of concept is what it's called. And proof of concept is not, I talked to my 20 aunts, uncles, cousins, and best friends, and they loved it. Proof of concept is, okay, well, we actually, we use SurveyMonkey, which would be a simple way, around with some pretty well thought out questions that weren't designed necessarily just by us, or we actually, did test research, or we built a prototype and had it used by the following groups, or you need actual customer experience. Your investors are going to want to see that, and the more proof of concept, the more viable you are, the more investable you are. You need that too. Forget the investors. You need the feedback of that experience. But anyway, the go-to-market strategy section of most decks is what's overlooked the most, and it's what I think most entrepreneurs overlook, and that is, okay, how does nifty idea get converted to cash?
Sure.
And it's much, much harder than people think. So your go-to-market strategy, and then also, what are the economics of all this? Your deck should at least have kind of a high-level plan, say a 3 to 5 year outlook with, 10 to 15 line items on it of revenues and expenses. It doesn't have to be, 50. It needs to be more than 3.
Okay.
And then it shows the progression of growth and, in your revenues or your T number of customers or adoptions. You need to understand what the right metrics are about your business. And some of them can be soft. That's okay. But it needs to be more than eyeballs. And some of it needs to be hard. It needs to be actual numbers. Everyone understands that your numbers are wrong.
Right.
Everybody gets that. Your projections are always wrong, but they need to be intellectually defensible.
Okay, no, that makes sense.
They need to be these are intelligent, well thought through plans that are based on reasonable, good assumptions. Look, there's a bit of a marketing game that goes on with this page, and it's kind of a double-edged sword. The truth of the matter is that there needs to be enough activity in those projections over a 5-year period that it excites people. It needs to move their needle, so to speak.
Fair.
And so, you are marketing a little bit here. On the other hand, I saw a deck recently where the person showed, I think it was 10 times growth 5 years in a row. I'm not good at math, whatever that is. It's just crazy. And that was across, the revenue metric and the customers adopted. It was just, went from 4 people to 400,000 in 4 years or something. And that's laughable. And so you kind of have to, you need to be sensible. It needs to be sensible based off some intelligent assumptions. and look, everybody expects some optimism. Again, you want to show the needle moving, but don't make it a joke.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really good advice, actually.
But most people, you'd think so, but the steepness of the hockey stick you typically see, it's what people call it because that's how the projections look like, a hockey stick.
Yeah.
It's so steep, too often, it's kind of silly. I'm trying to think what I missed. I mean, those are those are the key components, really. And then the other thing is, what's the ask? How much are you trying to raise, and what would it be used for? So
Sure.
if you're raising $500,000, where would the $5,000 go? $500,000, excuse me, and over what period of time would it be used, and what for? Now you don't need to put 20 line items of the what for, but don't just say marketing. It needs to have a little more depth than that, where the investor will understand. Okay, this is how the money's going to be used.
Sure, that makes sense. So,
And
it's interesting to me because like what you just talked about, I watch Shark Tank pretty much weekly, and it is interesting to me how many people kind of just blow this whole thing. You're right, and like sometimes the sharks just tear them apart because they're like, there's no way our company's worth anything, or and they're saying it's worth $4 million or something.
well, the producers know that, and
Sure.
they have to bring on a couple of bozos or people that look like they would be more appropriately contestants on The Price is Right than these hyper enthusiastic people in costumes, and who have some loony idea about something because that adds to the entertainment value. But you'd be surprised, that aside, you'd be surprised how even in normal angel meetings, some of the ideas aren't as vetted as you would have expected.
Interesting. Huh. That's a lot to consume. I'm just trying to think about this as we, kind of talk about this, and just kind of, just in my own experience, it's interesting how you talk about this stuff, and how important it really is to make sure that when you're pitching, you need to make sure that you've, done your homework, done your research. And I think one of the big things that people forget is, and you mentioned earlier, is make sure you do your research on people who are looking to invest, because you're right. If they don't invest in medical devices and you're looking to do something in the medical space, you might have missed the boat. But I find some people just want to get money from anybody, and they don't really care, and they don't really realize that could be really hurtful to their business.
Yeah, you only have so much time, so, do your own research. The other reason I'd tell you to do your research, besides making sure that you're pitching to the appropriate group for you, is, again, this is back what I'm saying before, at that stage, you're not just looking for money. You're looking for the right partner. Whoever invests in you is going to be pretty involved in your business.
Sure.
They'll have a board seat. They're going to want to meet with you frequently. You're going to want to meet with them frequently. You want their commercial connections, their advice. You're just not. It's unrealistic for people to think that the way the process works is you raise money and they give you money, and then you send them financial reports, and that's it. You really don't want that, even though you might think you do, and that's not how it really works, even if you wanted it to work that way. So you're looking for people whose skill sets, career history, connections, all are additive to the equation of trying to make you successful. And you need to be prepared to have them in your life, which should also tell you that when you go through that negotiating period, you should be, when you have to start negotiating your documents, you'll have interest that you want a smart attorney to help you negotiate, and that's critical because you don't know the stuff, and even if you read, Brad Feld's Venture Deals, you're not going to learn enough to really negotiate a good deal. You're going to need a good attorney, but how somebody negotiates with you should tell you also about whether or not you want them as a partner.
Sure, and probably how interested they are in your actual business.
Yeah, because look, it's the beginning. This is the beginning of the relationship. So if the negotiation process, for whatever reason, it starts giving you a lot of heartburn. Well, maybe you don't need to keep going down the path. Maybe that's the indicator that it's probably not a good fit. Now, some of this could be a function of, typically for a lot of entrepreneurs are newer to business, it might be your own discomfort or lack of understanding, et cetera. So make sure that it's not about you, that you need to be educated on the process, and make sure that your discomfort is valid and not some function of your own shortcoming. But if it is valid, then pay attention to your gut, because you're stuck with these people. So you want to make sure that whoever you end up having your partner is somebody that you want to have as they're your partner, and you're involved with them.
Sure. Well, and it could be years, right?
You're getting married.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're basically getting married in business, and just like the real world, divorces are difficult. They're
Sure.
They're messy. So.
No, I think that's awesome advice, and sadly, Bob, we're out of time. But I think
I talk too much. We
No.
always run out of time.
no, it's good. The thing is, it's good content. It's interesting. How about in closing, kind of maybe mention where people can find the Startup Expo online, and any other social media you want to promote? I know you're quite active on LinkedIn and a few other social media platforms.
Well, I will. Before I say that, a lot of the stuff's available on Google, so Google out there and learn more about how to raise capital.
Sure.
In terms of SoupX, the Startup Expo, again, our website is sup-x.org. You can follow us on Twitter at the SoupX, which is just at the SUPX. And I love it. I love meeting people on LinkedIn, so you can please invite me to join you on LinkedIn. I'm Bob Fitt, and with SoupX, the Startup Expo, I have over 22,000 LinkedIn connections all over the world, and they're all in the startup space, and I enjoy meeting others. So I'd be happy to connect on LinkedIn as well. We have a Facebook page for SoupX, also an Instagram account, and I couldn't tell you how to find either if I had to.
Well, I'll post.
My marketing director will not be happy about that. I'm sure you could find us there if you wanted to. And actually, if you look on our website, the social media links may be there.
Sure. I will also put all these links in the show notes. And I think it's interesting just to maybe mention quick is you and I connected on LinkedIn. We didn't know each other outside of LinkedIn before, right? And we met, what was it, May? No, it got to be May, June, somewhere in there.
And you and I are diagonally about as far across as you can get from one another in North America, but that was just on LinkedIn. I spend an hour and a half on LinkedIn every morning, every day of the week of the year.
Really?
Connecting with people that are in, LinkedIn sends you this thing called People You May Know, and if they're a startup, or they're in the VC or the angel world, or they're in accelerators or incubators or organizations like Startup Canada, and we obviously have similar interests, and I write them a personal invitation and ask them to connect, and lots don't and lots do, and that's how you and I met. And
yeah.
It is amazing, Kevin, how many of our speakers where they came from as well, which tells you, look, from a user interface standpoint, LinkedIn has a lot of things to be desired.
Sure. Yeah.
In terms of a tool itself, I'm an enormous advocate of it. I've met so many awesome people, and so many of them are a part of SoupX and other things that I do. I think it's a cool tool. The more you use it, the more you learn better ways to use it too.
Totally. I'm the same way. Like I think I'm at almost 12,000 LinkedIn connections now, and I use it all the time. And I don't do it daily, but I kind of go through, days every, maybe a couple times a month where I'll just heavily kind of connect with people and like-minded people. And in a lot of cases, well, it's how I met you. It's how I got the radio show. It's how I got my book deal. It's how, it's all through LinkedIn for the most part.
It's a powerful tool. The one other thing I'll say real quick, Kevin, before we cut off, and I know you got to go. If people do go to our website, go to the press page and click on the newsletters. We have newsletters we send out every 2 weeks to about 25,000 people throughout North America who are in the startup space. But there's a sign-up button on there, so if they just hit the sign-up button, then from that point forward, every time we send a newsletter out every 2 weeks announcing our new speakers, special pricing, all kinds of stuff, they'll be in the loop about what's going on with SUPAC.
Perfect, man. All right, well, this has been awesome. Thanks again for doing this, and we'll be in touch, and I look forward to seeing you in person in Florida in February.
It's always a pleasure, Kevin. I really appreciate your help, and we're looking forward to seeing y'all too.
Perfect. Thanks, man. Talk soon.
Thank you.
Okay, bye. Thanks for listening. You can visit past shows at buildingthefutureshow.com. If you're going to the Startup Expo on February 16th and 17th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and want to record an episode, please contact me. The music for the show is by Electric Mantra. Check them out at electricmantra.com. Until next time, keep building the future.